Welcome to History Channel. Be sure to subscribe and like so you don't miss out on more videos like this one. 3 Scandinavian monarchs gathered in Malmö in 1914, declaring neutrality at the dawn of World War I, hoping to shield their nations from conflict. The kings of Norway, Sweden, and Denmark symbolized unity in a divided Europe, presenting a rare moment of balance as global powers edged toward devastation. In January 1974, the brutal daylight murder of Athalia Ponsell Lindsley shocked St. Augustine, Florida. She was a wealthy socialite, killed in plain view, and though her killer was identified, the case never reached resolution. It remains one of Florida's most haunting unsolved crimes, leaving questions unanswered for decades. Captured in 1937, Japanese soldiers were documented bayoneting a prisoner during the Nanjing Massacre. This image reflects the brutality inflicted upon civilians and captives, part of widespread atrocities that claimed hundreds of thousands of lives. It remains one of the most horrifying records of wartime violence in 20th century history. The Klein-Scheidegg train station in Switzerland's Bernese Oberland in 1971 shows a moment of alpine life. Located between towering peaks, the station served as a gateway for travelers heading toward the Jungfraujoch. Its quiet charm contrasts with the dramatic natural backdrop, a symbol of European mountain tourism and endurance. On September 5, 1975, Lynette "Squeaky" Fromm attempted to assassinate President Gerald Ford in Sacramento. Her gun jammed and the attempt failed. Photographs show her restrained moments later. The event marked one of 2 assassination attempts on Ford within weeks, reflecting a turbulent period of American political unrest. In December 1981, during Poland's martial law, a Warsaw theater displayed Apocalypse Now. The film's poster stood against the tense backdrop of military rule. The contrast between cinematic depictions of war and the lived reality of repression offered a poignant image of culture resisting silence amid political turmoil. A portrait of Iran's royal family in 1945 captures Shah Mohammad Reza Pahlavi alongside relatives, taken before decades of turmoil that would eventually dismantle the monarchy. The image reflects the opulence of the court and a dynasty seeking modernity while balancing traditional power in a rapidly changing Middle East. A ballet performance of The White-Haired Girl in Shanghai, 1973, shows one of China's revolutionary model plays. Originally staged in Yan'an in 1945, it symbolized the struggle of peasants against oppression. The production fused art and ideology, becoming a cultural weapon in the Chinese Communist Party's propaganda during the Cultural Revolution. In late 1954, Hanoi streets displayed posters of Mao Zedong, Ho Chi Minh, and Georgy Malenkov, marking the city's communist takeover. The imagery reflected solidarity across socialist movements, symbolizing new alliances after colonial rule ended. It demonstrated the influence of communist leaders in shaping Vietnam's political and cultural future. Sharjah in 1976 presented a street scene of transformation. The city in the United Arab Emirates was on the edge of rapid modernization fueled by oil wealth, yet much of the old architecture and slower rhythms of daily life remained, bridging tradition with the promise of economic and cultural change. In Poland, 1970, young women stood by the roadside, trying to hitch rides near Częstochowa. It was a common practice during the era, as private cars were scarce and public transport limited. The scene reflects the improvisation of travel in communist-era Eastern Europe, blending youth, uncertainty, and everyday resilience. Protests erupted in 1971 as Sudeten Germans demonstrated against West Germany's recognition of Czechoslovakia's borders under Ostpolitik. Banners accused leaders like Brandt and Scheel of betraying their homeland. The rallies highlighted the deep scars of displacement after World War II and the persistence of unresolved identity and territorial grievances. A woman in East Germany is pictured smoking casually at an outdoor Dresden restaurant in the 1980s. Her relaxed posture contrasts with the restrictive nature of life under the German Democratic Republic. The image offers a rare glimpse of personal freedom in a society heavily defined by state control and surveillance. In 1954, Alfred Hitchcock's Rear Window premiered in New York. The groundbreaking film unfolded entirely on a massive set built to resemble a courtyard. It included 31 apartments, 8 fully furnished. The production pushed cinematic boundaries, cementing Hitchcock's reputation as a master of suspense and visual storytelling for generations. On July 9, 1980, the AD-1 aircraft took a test flight to evaluate oblique wings. Engineers hoped the unusual design could make supersonic flight more efficient. The prototype's radical appearance captured imaginations, though it never advanced beyond testing. It remains a symbol of bold innovation in experimental aviation history. In 1943, during the Warsaw Ghetto Uprising, Jewish civilians were forced out of hiding places by German troops. The uprising was a desperate act of resistance against impossible odds. Photographs show terrified families, embodying both the suffering and the courage that defined one of the Holocaust's most tragic chapters. In 1922 at Gallipoli, British pilots of 203 Squadron watched ground crews service a Nieuport Nightjar fighter. The moment reflects the transition period of aviation between the world wars, fragile yet advancing. These aircraft linked the fading legacy of World War I with the preparations for conflicts yet to come. On May 10, 1973, a man entered a Kenora bank armed with a rifle and a bomb triggered by a dead man's switch in his mouth. He was killed while fleeing, detonating the device instantly. His identity was never established, leaving behind one of Canada's strangest and most haunting mysteries. Secret photos of Joseph Stalin taken by his bodyguard Vlasik surfaced in the early 1960s, showing Stalin in unguarded moments. These images humanized a dictator long portrayed as a shadowy figure. They sparked controversy when smuggled abroad, challenging the carefully maintained image of Soviet leadership and revealing a more complex persona. A 1923 photograph of the USS Shenandoah shows Commander McCrary at the control gondola. The airship was among America's early attempts at rigid airship technology. The gondola bristled with instruments, reflecting optimism in lighter-than-air travel. Though airship ambitions would soon fade, it marked an experimental era in American aviation history. Dorothy Counts, a 15-year-old African-American student, faced a hostile crowd in Charlotte on September 4, 1957. She was among the first to integrate schools in North Carolina, enduring jeers and insults as she walked with dignity. Her courage became an enduring symbol of the struggle for civil rights in America. In April 1974, David Shanklin, 19, lived in a coal town in West Virginia. His girlfriend Janet Edwards, 17, still attended school. His father had died in the mines 2 decades earlier, yet David dreamed of following the same path, reflecting the enduring grip of mining life on Appalachian families. At the 1901 World's Fair, incubators were displayed as life-saving innovations. Dr. Stefan Tarnio was credited with their development. They offered hope for premature infants at a time when survival rates were low. Exhibitions like this introduced medical breakthroughs to the public, blending wonder with the promise of modern science. In Siberia around 1990, students from the Tomsk Military Medical Institute trained in the field wearing Soviet uniforms. The exercise reflected the emphasis on preparedness during the final years of the USSR. The young medic symbolized a generation balancing routine study with the looming uncertainties of a collapsing empire. The construction site of Munich's Olympic Stadium in 1969 captured Germany's ambition for the 1972 Games. The unique design featured sweeping canopies of glass and steel, symbolizing transparency and progress. The image shows a nation eager to reshape its global image through architecture, sport, and post-war cultural reinvention. Theda Bara starred in Cleopatra in 1917, one of the most extravagant silent films ever made. The production was lavish, but the film is now considered lost. Surviving images preserve her exotic costumes and commanding presence, cementing her legacy as one of Hollywood's first great screen icons and a symbol of early cinema. A dorm room scene at Penn State in 1914 shows students gathered informally, surrounded by books and personal belongings. The image reflects collegiate life in an era before modern conveniences, offering a glimpse into the rhythms of study, friendship, and youthful ambition at the dawn of the 20th century. A photograph from Grozny in 1995 shows a 54-year-old Chechen man, weary but resolute, after his people halted the Russian advance during the First Chechen War. His face reflects exhaustion and defiance, symbolizing the resilience of civilians caught in brutal conflict, standing amid destruction yet refusing to surrender to despair. In February 1954, Marilyn Monroe entertained American troops in Korea. Her visit lifted morale during the tense post-war years. Dressed simply yet radiant, she sang and joked with soldiers. The event became legendary, highlighting Monroe's role not only as a Hollywood star, but also as a symbol of comfort and hope. In Marseille, 1972, street painters worked among heavy traffic, turning sidewalks into open-air galleries. The city's vibrant character came alive through art created in chaotic surroundings, blending commerce, culture, and urban life. It reflected a France balancing tradition with modern expression, where everyday streets became canvases for creativity and resilience. In July 1945, a downed German FW-190 fighter lay in Peking, Bavaria. A smiling American GI waved from the cockpit. The image captured victory's light-hearted moment, symbolizing triumph after years of devastating conflict. It is a reminder of how humor and relief often accompanied the closing chapter of war. In 2002, London displayed Charles Babbage's difference engine, often called the grandfather of AI, built from 19th-century designs. The mechanical computer represented a visionary leap in technology. Though never completed in Babbage's lifetime, it foreshadowed modern computing, standing as both a marvel of engineering and a monument to human imagination. The wreckage of Rudolf Hess's Messerschmitt Bf 110D in 1941 lay scattered in Scotland. Hess, Hitler's deputy, had flown alone in a bizarre mission to negotiate peace. Instead, he was captured, spending the rest of his life in prison. The failed attempt remains one of World War II's strangest episodes. On September 3, 1939, the British Royal Navy issued a signal announcing hostilities with Germany. The message marked Britain's entry into World War II. Transmitted across the fleet, it signaled the start of a long and costly struggle, an urgent line that reshaped global history and defined a generation. In Baton Rouge, 1984, Jeffrey Doucette was escorted through an airport to face trial for kidnapping and assaulting an 11-year-old boy. Walking beside him was the boy's father, Gary Plotch, who moments later pulled a gun and killed Doucette live on television, creating one of history's most infamous vigilante cases. In 1953, Dark-haired women staged a boycott of the film Gentlemen Prefer Blondes in the United States. The Marilyn Monroe and Jane Russell hit was seen as glorifying blondes over brunettes. The playful protest reflected post-war beauty culture, Hollywood's influence, and the ongoing cultural obsession with hair color and identity. A striking photo from 1935 shows Boston police with three young boys who had stolen and crashed a car. The image captures the tension between childhood mischief and serious consequences, a reminder of how poverty and desperation during the Great Depression often drew even the youngest into acts of crime. On October 3, 1862, President Abraham Lincoln stood with Allan Pinkerton and Major General John M. McClernand in Antietam, Maryland. The meeting came just weeks after the bloodiest single-day battle in American history. It reflects Lincoln's personal involvement in military affairs and his reliance on both generals and intelligence figures. In September 1939, Germany invaded Poland, unleashing devastation across Europe. 2 days later, Britain and France declared war. The world plunged into its second global conflict within a generation. The invasion marked the beginning of World War II, setting into motion events that would reshape nations and alter history forever. A drugstore in Germany during the 1930s reveals life before supermarkets. Shelves were lined with goods ranging from household items to basic foods. Customers relied on clerks for service. The photo reflects a slower pace of consumer culture, just before modern retail systems would revolutionize shopping habits across the world. During the Moscow theater hostage crisis in October 2002, a Chechen woman known as a Black Widow sat beside a bomb. She and other militants held hundreds captive, demanding Russian withdrawal from Chechnya. The image illustrates the desperation and ruthlessness of insurgency, as well as the fear and tension inside. In 1869 Kayar, Iran, 17-year-old Badi was held in custody before execution. His crime was delivering a letter to the Shah. Despite his youth, he was sentenced to death by brutal means. His story became a symbol of faith and sacrifice, remembered as an example of courage against authority. On August 21, 1934, 3 acrobats known as the Three Jacksons performed high above New York, balancing on the Empire State Building's 86th floor ledge without safety nets. At 1,050 feet above ground, the daring stunt captured the era's fascination with risk, entertainment, and the breathtaking scale of urban landmarks. A rare image from the Crimean War between 1853 and 1856 shows a nurse tending to the wounded. The conflict was one of the first widely documented through photography, highlighting both the brutality of war and the vital role of medical care, foreshadowing modern nursing practices pioneered by Florence Nightingale. In 1999, siblings Curtis and Catherine Jones, aged 12 and 13, appeared in a Florida courtroom after killing their father's girlfriend. They were charged as adults. Later documents revealed years of abuse had driven them to violence. Their case remains one of the youngest examples of children tried for murder in America. On October 19, 1950, Green Bay Packers player Billy Grimes returned a kickoff under stadium lights, carrying a white football used for visibility in night games. New York Yankee George Brown tackled him moments later. The image captures both the intensity of early professional football and the sport's evolving traditions. In 1956, workers in Poznań, Poland, marched with banners declaring, "We demand bread." The protest was fueled by food shortages and harsh economic conditions. Communist forces suppressed the uprising with violence, leaving many dead. The event marked one of the first major challenges to Soviet-backed authority in Eastern Europe. On September 2, 1945, Japan formally surrendered aboard the USS Missouri in Tokyo Bay, ending World War II. The ceremony brought together Allied leaders and Japanese representatives, marking the conclusion of years of global conflict. It remains a defining moment of 20th century history, symbolizing both victory and the cost of war. The aftermath of the 1920 Wall Street bombing shows devastation in New York's financial district. Anarchists were suspected, but no one was ever convicted. The blast killed dozens and injured hundreds, shattering windows and damaging buildings. It was one of the deadliest terrorist attacks in American history before the modern era. In 1966, Polish leader Władysław Gomułka received a sudden kiss from a supporter during a public appearance. Photographs framed it as a spontaneous show of affection, but in the tightly controlled world of communist politics, such gestures were often staged. The moment reflects how regimes managed both propaganda and public image. Neal Cassidy's 1958 mugshot captures the restless spirit of the Beat Generation. He was a close companion to Jack Kerouac and Allen Ginsberg, inspiring characters in their works. The photo contrasts his cultural influence with his troubled life, reflecting how countercultural icons often lived on the edge of law and rebellion. In 1957, rescuers worked the wreckage of Albert Camus' car outside Paris. The Nobel Prize-winning writer was killed instantly when the vehicle crashed at high speed. His publisher and driver, Michel Gallimard, died days later. Camus' sudden death at only 46 cut short one of the century's most profound literary voices. In 1965, Wernher von Braun, director of NASA's Marshall Space Flight Center, was photographed at his Huntsville, Alabama office, once a German rocket engineer. Von Braun became central to America's space program. His leadership and designs would eventually send Apollo astronauts to the moon, cementing his place in scientific and controversial history.